Democracy is fragile. So why do we even have it? Why do we have democracy anyway? Well, to kind of take you through this philosophical journey, we have Aristotle, rather than saying that he didn't trust the people, because he did. He also said that people can discern what is right using logic. They don't have to look for a sign from Zeus. A priestess who's interpreting the will of Athena does not necessarily determine what's right and wrong. We can figure that out for ourselves. We can use logic, natural law, to figure out what's right. What's a way of proceeding? During the Enlightenment, Martin Luther was a Catholic priest. And he felt that the church in Rome was what? Can anybody tell me? Corrupt? Absolutely. Right? He pointed to lots of things that were happening, whether it be financially corrupt, whether it be because of power, whether it be that, they were hypocritical in the types of things that they said were okay for, or not okay for the people, but were okay for them. Right? And since he felt that the church was corrupt, he said, you know what? The truth is we can talk to God ourselves. And he later regretted this, just so you know. He was like, the masses, terrible. Right? Again, like Aristotle. He was like, I meant the people who, could read, right? Should read. He's a little bit of a snob. But at the same time, he put forth this crazy idea that it didn't have to be the Pope who determined who our ruler was. That we could make that determination ourselves. That we as a nation, or a town, or a state, could determine what our governance would be. Hobbes and Locke wrote after this. And they wrote about a social contract. Now, Hobbes was much more, I would say, pessimistic than Locke, but also Hobbes was writing for a king, right? Specifically for a king. And so you take his words with a bit of a grain of salt. But he said, prior to government, life was, can anybody tell me? It's a great quote. Do you know it? Nasty, brutish, and short. Right? We have government for a reason. It's to protect us. And so we have formed a social contract with government, with our governors, with the people that we expect to be in charge, so that they protect us. So that our neighbor doesn't take all of our stuff. So that, people don't come from somewhere else and, cause and rape and pillage. Right? That's why we have government. It's the whole point. Locke goes a little bit further. He said the social contract includes some other stuff. Government's supposed to protect life and liberty. It's supposed to protect property and provide justice. This social contract we have entered into, we are continuing as a part of the social contract that we created in the United States and we continue to build on. And if you reject that social contract, then you have to do what? You have to go through formal mechanisms to change that contract. We want something else. We want something better. Locke says if there is natural law, then there are natural rights. Which brings us to what you guys read for this week. We're pretty close. We're thinking a lot about John Locke during the Revolution. We're reading his second treatise of government. I wasn't actually alive at the time. I mean, close, but not quite. Adam Smith is writing The Wealth of Nations. Does anybody know what that's about? I put that up there too, if you guys just want to reread.
Yeah, I read it before, but a while.
Synopsis, any thoughts?
It's generally just about Leah and Stan in there. Free market. That's the law I read from it.
The main thing he says is this. He says, nations are poor because of colonialism, because governments are controlling trade, and that nations would be wealthy, all of them would be wealthy if they were able to export what it was that they did best. Right? Whether those be natural resources, whether that be labor, whether that be, in the case of the United States at this time, trade. That's what we did. Thomas Paine writes Common Sense at the same time. And the interesting thing about Common Sense, this is a pamphlet that is written, and it sells as many copies in the United States as there are adults. It's what funds all of the profits from it, fund George Washington's Revolutionary Army. Think about that. And he says, it is common sense that an island cannot rule a continent. It is common sense that if I am, arrested for a crime, then I deserve to be tried by my peers here, not across an ocean. It's common sense. The taxation here must have representation. It's common sense. It's very popular. You guys, I can tell, are stirred and you want to read it right now. It's available. It's available, right? It's pretty short, really. What I had you read was the Declaration of Independence. So let's talk about it. How does it start? How does it start? When in the course of human events, this is his first draft, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for a people to separate from a nation, that it's necessary that they explain why it is that they've done this. It's necessary for them to do that. In other words, dear John, we're leaving, but in case you want to know why, I'm posting it on Facebook for all of our friends to read. That's what they did, right? I mean, they said this everywhere. And then Jefferson says something revolutionary. He says, we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal. In other words, he says, duh, everybody's equal. And the rest of the world's going, no, they're not. Most of the United States is going, right? This is a crazy principle. This is a revolutionary idea. It's revolutionary to suggest that men, and later we're going to talk about Seneca Falls, humans, are created equal. Now, do people read this and go, oh yeah, totally. What are you saying? Of course not. But it's stuck. It's stuck in people's minds. It's a principle that's stuck. You guys tell me some other things that you saw there, some things that stuck out. I know you read it, because it's the first week of class, you have nothing else to do. Yeah. What? Oh, it took a ton from John Locke, right? So Jefferson, when he's writing it, he's rewriting John Locke. He talks about life, liberty, and he says pursuit of happiness, though. Locke doesn't say that. Locke says property. Jefferson also says something revolutionary here. And I'm going to tell you what happiness means, if you'll know. I asked this question, because I always ask it as a multiple choice question on your exam. Just a hint. All right? Happiness in 1776 meant fulfillment. It meant being all you can be. It was a Nike commercial. He says government is required to provide us the opportunity to be the best we can be. What? This is also revolutionary. And also not exactly something that we've fulfilled yet. We're still working on it, right? I mean, I think we've gotten closer on equality. Still not there. Still not there. But we're closer. And we're working on this one too. Meaning, you're born as this individual who has all this potential. And Jefferson is saying the job of government is to make sure you're able to fulfill it. Not that you do, right? Because, people make choices. Not always good ones. But that you can. These are some revolutionary ideas. What else do you guys see? Yeah.
Saying that our people the French filed state filed the trial.
Yes, he's absolutely saying that. We shouldn't have to go somewhere else to be tried. He's copying common sense right there. Yeah. Yeah, we've tried to go through the right channels, right? We have gone through your courts. We have petitioned the king. We have petitioned Parliament. We've got nowhere. Oh, social contract, right? He's pulling some Hobbes there. The legitimacy of this government rests upon the consent of the governed. If we, the people, do not consent, then government is illegitimate. And we're going to talk later about laws that are just and unjust, right? And we're going to start talking about people saying, I don't consent to that. This is an unjust law. This is what he's talking about right here. He then does a list of grievances, right? He says, hey, look, we're not leaving just because you left the toilet seat up, right? That's a problem, but it's because you beat us. It's because you demanded we show papers all the time. It's because it has been a history of usurpations. It's been a history of degradation. And we're out. And then they all sign it. The most elite in the colonies at that time signed an incredibly treasonous document. And they said, yeah, this is how we feel. All right, so I want you guys to think about these principles because they're key. And as it was pointed out, he does take from a lot of people, particularly Locke, social contract theory, protection of equal liberties. He also says this, right? It's not just a right to revolt. If government is unjust, it is a what? It's a duty. You are not being good citizens if you don't protest. If you see something wrong and you don't say something, then you are not living up to your responsibilities as a citizen. And if that doesn't work, it's not just a right to revolt. It's a duty. So the Declaration has a lot of rebellion in it, obviously. It talks about liberty, solidarity. It's very optimistic, right? I mean, it is. I told you, there's some stuff in there that people didn't buy, right? I mean, they gave some lip service to it. I mean, even Jefferson, right? He wanted to believe it. But the fact that they wanted to believe it, the fact that they put their names on it, means that it lasts. And that we, over time, believe it. And understand that today, republics across the world say these things. We have to be egalitarian. Justice is key. We see a lot of this optimism reflected in the state constitutions that were created at that time, the 13 original colonies. I want to sing this all. But things change, right? Jefferson said, hey, this Constitution, and we're going to get to the Constitution a little bit. He said, this Constitution is good for now, but the tree of liberty is watered by, anyone? The blood of tyrants. He said, we're going to have to fight this again, because if we don't get rid of slavery now, which we're going to talk about next week, then we're going to fight about it at some point. It took a little bit longer than Jefferson thought, but the Civil War is absolutely a new founding, a new beginning, a massive change to the United States. What happens after the Civil War is a fundamental change in many of the things. Not these principles that Jefferson talks about, right? But in our system of governance, in the Constitution. Lincoln's going to use the Declaration, not the Constitution, whenever he is pulling for principles. He's going to say all men are created equal is the standard maxim of free society. He says Jefferson had the coolness, forecast, and capacity to introduce into a merely revolutionary document an abstract truth. Right? Applicable to all men in all times, and so to embalm it there, that today and in all coming days it shall be a rebuke and a stumbling block to the very harbingers of reappearing tyranny and oppression. We use the Declaration of Independence over and over and over again to remind us about the principles upon which the nation was founded. It's the emblem of humanity, the Declaration of Independence. Just before that, in 1848, by the way, there's this, we're going to talk about this when we get to civil rights, absolutely. But there are men and women who are working together, black and white, trying to end slavery, right? The anti-slavery society, that's not it, I'll come just a second. The anti-slavery, William Lloyd Garrison, and you have a ton of women that are the backbone of this institution. But it turns out they go places and they say, you can't enter, you can't travel by yourself, woman. Oh, you don't have a right to that. Your property. And they went, oh, your property too. And so here in 1917, and we're going to talk about Declaration of the Rights of Women in 1848, but in 1917, whenever Carrie Chapman Catt is talking about women's equality, she's going to pull on Jefferson. She's going to say, ours is a nation born of revolution, against a rebellion against a system of government so securely entrenched in the customs and traditions of human society that in 1776 it seemed impregnable. Understand this. There were a millennia of history and tradition against which the American Revolution came. Not 100 years, thousands of years. And she's saying, look, us too. From the beginning of things, nations have been ruled by kings and for kings, while the people served and paid the cost. The American Revolution has boldly proclaimed the heresies. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And she said, you know, us too. Women have been under men since the beginning of time. And this government is not legitimate if we do not consent to it. It does not have power over us unless we consent to it. She's going to pull from the Declaration of Independence. More modern founder, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his I Have a Dream speech, he says, I say to you today, my friends, even though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that we hold these truths self-evident. All men are created equal. You guys read Letter from a Birmingham Jail, and we only have about 5 minutes to talk about it, so let's talk about it. What'd you guys see there? A Letter from a Birmingham Jail. How many of you had read it before? Good. What do you see there? What do you see there? Okay, he lays out his justifications for the entire civil rights movement. Okay, what else? Yes? A lot of ties to religion, absolutely, because he's speaking as a preacher, right? That's where he comes from. He comes from his religious background. He says, hey, look, you know, and understand, he's writing this to who? The pastors in Birmingham who had come to him and said, hey, my God, you're just causing trouble around here.
There's multiple examples of what had happened in the past to show things that happened back then were not right.
He gives multiple examples of past things that have been overturned. He says, hey, just because we've always done it this way, or we've done it this way for a while, doesn't mean it's right. Yeah. Disappointment of the white moderate, right? It doesn't help that you go, yeah, it's wrong, but we're just going to sit over here, okay? Right? Because Jefferson would say they had a what? A duty, right? Yeah. Okay, at least they're not, at least they're taking a stand. At least we know where you are. Right? What else? Yeah. He doesn't want to use violence, right? And that's a difference between, and we're going to talk about that a lot when we talk about nonviolent movements in civil rights. Yeah. Right, he's disappointed that these moral persons are so immoral. One of my favorite parts of it, or one of the parts that most resonate with me, is where he talks about his little girl, And he says, I watched my perfect, beautiful, innocent child be twisted by your hate. So her mind develops an unconscious hatred of the white person when she shouldn't have to hate people. You're doing this.
So he goes on to say, so his question about why he follows some laws, doesn't follow others, because he sees some as just, unjust. It's going on to explain that just laws are laws that people make and will everybody to follow, while unjust laws are pointed at a specific minority or group or anything like that, and majority do not follow it.
Perfect. He talks about the difference between just and unjust laws, and he's specific about it. He says unjust laws are aimed at a group of people so that it doesn't affect the majority. Right? That's what makes them unjust, or many things make them unjust, but that's one of the key things, right? We're going to come back. Don't worry, to letter from Birmingham jail, but I want that to be there. I want you guys to understand this is a founding document. This is a founding document of who we are. Now, Abigail Adams is a little concerned. First of all, she says things like, hey, don't forget the ladies, and they do. But she says, can any government be free which is not administered by general stated laws? Who shall frame the laws? Who shall give them energy? How are we going to choose these people? Oh yeah, don't forget to include women. They did, don't worry. James Madison, who we're going to talk about next week, who's a genius. I mean, really, flat out genius. Checks and balances, shared power, federalism, and creates a framework for the rule of law. And yes, unjust laws end up in there, but we have challenges to those, right? He's also going to have an understanding of self-interest and promoting civic interest. If you compare the two, one is poetry. I mean, it's fun to read the Declaration of Independence, frankly, I think. Constitution's harder. It's prose, right? You have to work through it. You have to remember that this amendment changes this section. But a republic means that the law rules. A republic means that the law rules. Today, even tyrannies claim to be republic. It opposes the idea of the divine right of kings. God does not say who the king is or the president is. We, the people, do. When people say, hey, this is a Christian nation, I'll say, hey, look, that's not true. Specifically, all religious qualifications are left out of the Constitution on purpose. Jefferson is a deist. Madison, absolutely, a devout Christian, but believed in the separation of church and state. He said, government, politics corrupts my pure faith and religion. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. All persons, the minority and majority, must follow the rule of law and policies of the majority that are lawful. But a republic requires the rule of law is above the tides of public sentiment. Things about that. Okay, so normally at this time, I would give you a poll, right? And I'm not going to do it today because we haven't downloaded the app. But I do want you before class on Monday to use your phone. How many of you have downloaded it? A few? The Cengage app on your phone? Go to it if you don't mind. Do you have it on yours? Do you have the quiz on your, the question on yours? If not, I got it on mine. Yeah, I got it. Cengage is this blue, it's blue with a white thing. If you go to the App Store, it's blue with a white flower or star sort of thing, Cengage. You can download it, it's pretty easy. And then you log in using the login. You have to have already logged in. Okay, if you haven't gotten the book yet, you can't do it. But if you have, log in. We are in 11/13/30, fall 2021, that's us. I'll give you guys a little poll here. Or would. There we go. All right, I've given you 2 minutes to do this poll. If you want to do that poll, I'd be interested in seeing it. So try downloading that app. If you already have it, answer the poll. We'll take attendance on that app on Monday as a trial run, and then on Wednesday for sure. So get it downloaded by Monday to make sure that it works, okay? And until Wednesday, Boomer!
Labs on Friday.
Labs on Friday, don't forget.